What we're making is actually this guy here, but I want to back up a little bit and tell you how I got here. So behind me on the wall, I've got my big tool cabinet with the folding doors. That's basically got everything I can think of in there. When I started to travel and teach, I had a little canvas tote with me. I'd throw some stuff in there, and then to get to anything, I'd have to lay it out on the bench and dig through things to get what I want. Next thing I knew, I had no bench space and all my tools were out there. So I said, well, let me come up with a little travel chest, see if I can get something that was small enough to travel with and big enough to hold an essential kit of tools. That's when I decided on this case. This is the first travel chest that I built. I tried to figure out, okay, if I'm teaching on the road for 8 or 10 days, what am I going to want to have? So this case basically has everything I could think of. There are some luxuries here. This holds 3 different hand planes, a 4, a 5, and then a bevel up smoother as well. A couple back saws, Japanese saws, coping saw, fret saw. Basically just about everything that's going to keep me happy. The thing about this one is it's big. It's really too big to sit on the end of my bench. I think it takes up too much space. So I ended up making a rolling base for this. And this one is just I guess my prototype base. This is just made out of lumber grade pine. When I teach this as a class, we make it out of walnut, dress it up a little bit. I've included plans for the base if you're interested in making the bigger case instead of this small one. I've also included plans for the big case as well. So really, you can kind of pick and choose, see what is going to suit you best. But overall, I'm going to be demonstrating on parts for the smaller chest. So why did I end up making a smaller chest? Well, the big chest is great when I was driving. I could put it in the back of my car. When I started flying a little bit, I needed something smaller. So I came up with basically a smaller version of the same chest. Doesn't quite hold as many tools, but it still holds what I consider to be an essential toolkit. And again, I've traveled and I've taught week-long classes out of my little case. It suits me just fine. So the main difference on the interior, instead of 3 bench planes, I've got a number 4. In addition, I've got a block plane, shoulder plane, Japanese saw, coping saw, fret saw. The really cool thing about this is that even though it's a smaller case, on the larger case, in order to access the chisels, I had those sitting in a drawer. They're all set here. That's fine, works out really, really well. But I do like the style of tool chest where you can access the chisels from the top. So I've got a row of chisels in the back. So basically what, to me, an important criteria for a tool chest is that I should be able to get to all the tools I want without having to move something else out of the way, or ideally without having to open a drawer on something like chisels where I'm using them quite often. I loved having these accessible. So even though it's a little bit smaller, I think it's a little bit more efficient as well. The main difference, I think, between the 2 chests, other than the size, is that the drawers on the bigger chest, there is a solid full depth shelf which divides them, and those drawers slide on that divider. Because I didn't have a lot of room on the smaller case vertically, we'll talk about these pins in just a minute, I went with side hung drawers on runners. So basically, without the width of that divider between, I was able to maximize the height and get as much storage out of the drawers. So these little pins, they fit through holes in the back of the drawers. There are blocks in the back. And pins drop down from the top and secure the drawers there. On the bigger drawers, I did have room for half mortise locks to lock these in place, which is nice. We need to figure out a way to keep the drawers from sliding in and out as we're traveling. So this has locks there. And again, because the drawers are a little bit narrow, there wasn't room for locks. That's why I went with the pin. This lid also has a half mortise lock securing the lid. I never really got a lot of use out of that. So on this particular case, my first version, I don't have any lock for the lid. That's how we're going to build our case. So I did make some changes between this case and the case I'm going to be building in this class. One of the main differences is the case is a little bit taller. That's because I use Japanese chisels, which tend to be pretty short. So I size my case based on the height of those chisels, where other common chisel brands tend to be a little bit longer, whether it's Veritas, Narex, Wood River, Two Cherries, Lee Nielsen. I kind of did a survey and kind of figured out how high we needed to be to comfortably get the chisels in there. So that made the case a little bit taller, which was also cool because it allowed the drawers to be a little bit higher and more functional as well. So the drawers in this case, I have outfitted with lift-out trays or tools. And this makes it really convenient and really modular. It's a good way to get a lot of stuff in a shallow space. In our case that we're going to be making, I would like to also get into outfitting the drawers with partitions, which is super cool, really fun. It lets you customize the chest for whatever you want to be doing. Gives it kind of a really nice finished look. So I am going to be talking about the interior. So the drawers on this particular chest, so this is a little bit cleaner now. This has evolved a little bit. And instead of having half-line dovetails at the front, I'm going to do a pinned rabbet joint, which I think is in keeping with the style of the chest. This is typical on Tansu style furniture. It's also really fast and fun. I end up using this style of drawer on a lot of my pieces. The back is now inset into the sides in a dado, and the little block for the pins is glued in, creating an extra strong joint there as well. On my original chest, I went with the rope handle, which is really kind of cool, especially if you don't have any hardware. On the chest we're making, I did find some hardware that I like, and I think it's within keeping of the chest. And I have some black iron ring pulls for the drawers as well. One more thing I want to talk about really briefly. I did mention raising the height of the chest for chisels that are a little bit longer, and it really started to speak to the notion of sizing the chest to the tools you want to fit in it, rather than limiting the tools you have to fit a chest that's already made, if that makes sense. So while this works for me, and it may work for you, you might find some slight dimensional changes are going to help. And so how did I come out with this? Well, first of all, it's a little bit upside down, where a lot of times you'll have a tool well sitting in the bottom of a chest and maybe some sliding trays above. I kind of flipped that upside down to where our trays basically became drawers on the bottom. Our tool well sits right up top. So the depth of the well really is determined by the tallest thing I want to keep in there. So in that case, it's my number 4 plane. My combination square is also about that same height as well. So that's going to determine the height of my well. The chisels, if you're running those vertically, is going to determine the overall height. So that kind of sets those two outside dimensions. In terms of the width of the case, sort of the longest tool I have is a Japanese trim saw. When I bought a new trim saw that was a little bit longer, I just cut the handle off. Blue tape is not the nicest detail, but again, certainly that was a good solution if we've got to get there. I've also got a block plane and a bench plane end to end. So once I kind of determined an overall size, I just laid all the tools out on the bench and tried to get a sense of how they were all going to fit within the overall dimensions that I thought was right, and then made any changes necessary before I got too far along. Okay.